Hi, this is DJ Jigola from Berlin, and this is how I DJ. I could definitely remember the first time, and it was very rudimental, and it was really bad. It was mixing vinyl together, and the first time I kind of adjusted the tempo was a big relief for me, you know, because you're just like working around the vinyl, trying, first you have to find the cue point, and then you kind of have to find the perfect tempo on both. It was at a friend's house because I couldn't afford a setup, especially Technics. And then I got Technics way later, and that was when I was a teenager, because I'm a Berlin kid, and the one music you just confronted with is techno music. And at the time when I was a teenager, people were using vinyl quite frequently, so I just wanted to know what it feels like doing it myself. Today I'm going to talk about two essentials of my DJ mixing. One essential is phrasing. I'm going to talk about that later, and also using hot cues for live editing of DJ sets. Usually I start with preparing my tracks. I prepare the music in Rekordbox. That is a software that shows the audio files of the tracks, and it's kind of like works like the CDJ. So it's the software that works on a CDJ and allows me to do a lot of stuff and preparing before I actually go on a DJ mixing setup. This is the export mode of Rekordbox. I have two players where I can load in tracks. On this part you can see playlists I made. Today I made a playlist that's called DJ Mag 2025. What I do, I have some example tracks here. I load a track into the deck. And the track looks like this. So phrasing in techno music refers to the way musical phrases, which is in a 4/4 beat, usually 4, 8, 16, or 32 bars. To give you an idea, is when you're on a dance floor and you're raving, and there's like this feeling when you know, oh, there's a change going to happen. And it's this feeling that is created by the use of musical phrasing. The first thing you have to do is identify, well, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 phrase. The most important thing is to find the 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the track, it's a Rekordbox setting that usually starts on the 1. If you want to change the grid, you could also go here and then select the grid here, and it would change the 1 to the second bar. I set a cue and I let it play. And to give you an idea of phrasing here is, I'm going to count, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is one musical phrase, then there comes another musical phrase. Now we're at 16, and after the first 16 bars, the drums come in, and now it takes another 16 bars. You can, if you don't know, like usually you can rely on when the breakdowns come down, but I recommend listening to your own music. So there was a vocal, and it's even building up more. What I recommend you doing is taking out a track, listening to it, counting the phrases, and identify 8 bar, 16 bar, and 32 bar phrases, and get an idea of how music is structured. So what I do next is I'm gonna set cue points at the beginning of phrases. Put a copy of the track here, how I do it. So let's say I'm gonna do it live in the version that has no hot cues. What I do is I go in this window, and I press A as a hot cue, like at a cue point, which is like a hot cue. So the moment I press it, it'll play from that exact point that I set. So this one I set at the beginning of the track, and every time I click it, it'll go back to the track. That is a function that I can reproduce on a CDJ while I'm mixing. When I'm in a mix, sometimes, you know, the audience wants, you have to take the audience to a drop. You kind of have to introduce a change. So when I set hot cues and cue points, I can just live edit the flow of the set. I can either introduce a drop quickly, or I can like stay in a consistent loop for a long time. What I also do when I do hot cues and I set them, that is why I put this track before. If I like that track, and you know that you listen to a track, you think it's fabulous, and then the first breakdown comes, you think, I really don't like the breakdown. Or there's an element in the track that you really don't like, but you would love to play the track because you like the drum arrangement or something. Hot cues allow you to leave out parts of the tracks that you don't like, without putting them in Ableton. What I do is I basically select a part that I can transition and blend perfectly with another part. And then I mark these two parts with two hot cues so I don't forget. Basically, you can see from here to here is 16 bars, from C to here is 16 bars. The last 4 bars, I do the transition then I jump from G to H, which is now sounds like a lot of theoretical stuff, but I'm going to show you in the mix. Sometimes what I also do, that's like the memory section. Memory is basically a setting that you can load into your music. The CDJ will automatically set the first cue point to the memory cue point that you selected. So what I do first is I go in memory, I press Q and I press memory here. And you see here in the memory section that it shows me that there's a memory cue point. You can also see it, now it's like the A, I'm going to delete the A just to show you. It is visible by that sign, like this rectangle, the red one. And the same thing, what I do, let's set the auto loop, for example, here. I'm gonna set a loop. And then I'm gonna play memory. It'll appear here. And then I need to lock it. If I really want the track, to just stay in the loop. So what'll happen is the track will play on a CDJ and it'll just automatically go into a loop that'll go on forever. And that's like the memory loop. Now I want to load the settings on the USB, and something that I found quite helpful. Click on the device, you can kind of alter the settings that are on the device. When you see category, you can kind of change the way the categories are displayed on a CDJ. And it makes it very easy for your personal style to change the setup. This is like a nice option because the problem basically is that almost every DJ uses these USBs. So what I do, like to double check that my settings are loading and that I can see my USB, I select the color. One last option that I really like is you go on a general. That is maybe also important because it's kind of like how you display the wave file, like the audio file. I use 3-band. 3-band is basically the color coding of the audio file. In 3 bands, it's like 3 different colors. It's orange, white, and blue. And it's almost like representative of the equalizing, the low ends, the mid ends, and the high ends. And now I'm gonna do the sync manager. That allows me to put the music I prepared, the playlist I did, on the device. This is the device. Now I go into the playlist that I wanna do. I don't wanna synchronize everything, so it's just this one I wanna synchronize. And then I press here. And now the music is synchronized on my USB. I always prep my sets, but I never really prep my sets. So I would say the foundation of my music is prepared because I care about the music I play. If I select parts of songs that I like and if I put them in a flowy mix, that is kind of me expressing something. But I would never prepare a set and play the set just the way it is because I want to be able to react and respond to my audience. Every new music that I put into my record box, I prepare, and then it's just evolving through the year. And I really like that now that I'm playing a lot of different countries, I always bring something different. For example, in the US, maybe it's a bit more drop driven. In Europe, it's more hypnotic, and then translating the one idea into another idea while I'm in a mix. From my experience I had in the one part of the world and in the other part of the world is something very beautiful where I also feel like I'm connecting different cultures in the music I play. We're actually transitioning from the home setup of preparing to music to the actual DJ setup in a club or at a venue. That is a very advanced setup. Usually it consists of the mixer and CDJs. I like the V10, which is the most current mixer by Pioneer, and I like the CDJ 3000s, that's usually the setup I DJ on. I would recommend learning DJing on vinyl still because it allows you to be comfortable in mixing. But whatever you have, just like watch some tutorials and know your equipment. That's the only recommendation I can give you. So what you see here is like these are the channels we're working on. 4 equalizers, 2 mid equalizers, which I really like because it allows me to do smoother blends. Because in the mids there sits a lot of the melody, the low ends is mostly the bass and the kick, and the high ends is mostly like hi-hats. But like the dominant part of the track sits in the middle. Claps, snares sit in the middle. Most drums sit in the middle with the high ends, and like the punch of it sits in the low ends. So this is all in a medium. What you see here is a function I really love. about the V10, but it's not on the other mixes. So if you don't have a V10, don't get bothered. It's a compressor. When you have a track that you just made in the hotel room, you want to play it, it's not mastered, and there's a bigger dynamic range between the louder parts and the not so loud part. And what a compressor does, it brings these parts together and it boosts the loudness. So instead of just changing the loudness of the channel and working with the gain, you can just do the compression function and kind of put the tracks on the same level. And it's really great for tracks that are either vinyl rips that you made and you didn't master, or your own tracks that you didn't master. What I like to do comes from me doing a lot of DIY parties with my label. I like to mix on headphones. I don't use monitors. Sometimes it was a very shitty setup with a lot of latency. So for me, mixing on headphones is a way to secure that I'm really doing a neat mix, as I don't use BeatSync. And what I love about the V10, the cue point here, that's like the master channel, is when I select that I can listen to the track that is playing. What I do here, you see master and cue. So if I turn this knob to master, I'll only hear the master that's playing. And now you see A, I'm plugged into A. And then I select Q, now B is everywhere selected, which we don't need. I select, I don't know, the channel I want to listen to, I would press here. And if I only want to listen to the track, it would be just turning this knob on Q. If I kind of want to listen to how both sound together, I would put it in the middle. And now my favorite function about it is, if you mix in a track, usually the equalizing is off, then you would hear almost nothing, or let's say the low ends are off because you're blending it in. The pre and post EQ button here allows you to listen to the track in its full function, in its full sound, although the equalizers are turned down. This is a studio setup and I am in control of the sound, but there's one thing I recommend to everyone to always bring to your set, and it's like very important. It's like these two knobby things is like the protection for your ear. And I recommend everyone, every beginner, get these first and like put them in your ear. They're like special ones for DJs, so you just hear all the frequencies, but it is less loud because you only have these ears, and once you destroy them, there's no way to restore it. I'm a browser girl, so there's not one source I won't do. Listening to a lot of podcasts, listening to DJs you like, but also digging deep into SoundCloud, into Bandcamp, listening to even like algorithmic playlists curated by artists you love. And that's the way I find new music, the way I realize I need a certain song, or the way I'm getting inspired about music is by DJ mixing. So when I'm blending two tracks together, I realize, oh, the new song that is created by the blend is something I find quite interesting, and I kind of want to reproduce that in a studio, or want to find online if I find something similar that's already made into one track. So that is also a source of inspiration. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the USB in, the one that we prepared, and now you're going to see the magic of the settings we put in. So we press it in, and now there should appear something purple. Let's see. We go into source, and voila! There's the purple Gigolo 5, and you see here there's a purple light. So you'll know this is where your USB is, and it's not that one. So you see now it's playlist, history, artist, album, track, rating, and key. That is like the categories we chose before. And what I do now, if I press on playlists, so we're gonna listen to the same phrasing that we listened to before in Rekordbox. It'll coming in with B, and I'll open to B, and I'll show you how I'm gonna skip the part I didn't like. So that was basically, I just skipped the whole section with the perfect fitting hot cue. That was just like when one track is running, and like that I mix all the time like that. I just skip parts I don't like in music. One amazing thing about the hot cue section is when I go back in a track and I set a cue point here. You can do this when the track is running, so the cue point is here. Maybe I'm in the mix and I'm like, oh, this part would be really good for a cue jump. Then what I can do, I can just, you see the hot cue section, I just set the D and then. And like that, you can kind of like edit the track live. So if it's a great crowd, I can play for 10 hours. If it's like a context I don't like, the sound design of the stage is not great, or the overall vibe is not great, or I really simply cannot connect with the crowd, I would prefer if the set is as short as possible. I don't mind doing an hour set, like a Boiler Room, which is condensed energy and almost something artistic that you do. So I'd say in order to tell a story or create a certain flow, it would start around 2 hours. And 2 to 4 hours is more storytelling, and you have a crowd that goes deep into the music, and everything below 1.5 hours is more like a performance DJ set where you present yourself, and mostly that will include a lot of my own tracks that I play. So I did a closing back-to-back MCRT at our Life from Earth parties in Berghain, and it was 12 hours. I had a broken leg, but I really enjoyed it. Because closing crowds, they are very open, because you and the crowd, you made it to the very end, and both of you decided not to leave. So there's a special energy in the room. And then you just go as long as they can go. Okay, now I'm gonna do a full transition of 2 tracks. What I did here, that you can see, there's an F and an F. Sometimes if I know the tracks, I mark with hot cues the transitional parts. They are both in the same key, which will really help elevate the mix. Now we're going into the technical part. Okay, so So yeah, that was a transition I made in phrasing. You saw me once jump to a hot cue because I wanted to loop the same part again, I can jump in the big sections on both tracks and they still sound like one sound. So it's kind of like a blend that I can go on forever and play within the blend. This thing that was activated here is an auto loop I have that makes sure that if I'm in a long mix, the track never runs out unless I decide that I want it to run out. And what I would do, will we go back? So the track is playing, what you hear here. On this loop, because it's like so basic and minimal, it's a 4-bar loop, I could mix in every other track as long as I started in the right phrasing, which is more difficult with 4-bar loops. It's kind of like almost an emergency loop that I set for myself. If I don't want it, what I just do is I'm gonna press exit of the loop, which you can see now. And the track is done. What you may have seen me doing while I was in the mix, I start looping in a track. So what I do is when a track is running, let's say this one, let's go to the G section. I make sure if I want to mix this track in, I find like one hot cue or like a 1 in the phrasing grid. So the beginning of a 30-second bar after 30-second bars, which would be the F point. And I set like a loop. What you just saw me doing is you can either select beat loop here, and then you can go to the range of the beat loop. You can do the beat loop also here. I like to do it here. I explained to you every 30-second bar I change, the track changes and I have my hot cues there. So I do it half time of 30-second bars. I also know that that song allows it for me to do, because what happens if you just set a 4-bar loop and you're not really good in the phrasing, or you forget counting because maybe you're in a, I don't know, difficult mix, or you have something else on your mind, or you're thinking about the next 2 tracks. When you release that loop, not on the first part of the begin of the new musical phrase, it'll mess up the beautiful transition. So what I just do, I prefer to work in 16-bar loops, but it really depends on your pro level. Let's say I want to mix this one in here. We're going here, which is and just like that, I do a mix, and it doesn't need any filter or whatsoever, because the music already is created in a way that there's a lot of filtering happening in the drops and in the changes from the musical phrasing. One advice I would probably have: play as many DJ sets as you can in front of a crowd. It doesn't make a DJ with a home setup and 1,000 sets that you play to yourself. DJing is about community, it's about a DJ and a crowd interacting with each other, and that is something you can only practice by exposing yourself, even if it's just 4 people. Try to DJ as much as you can in front of people.